talking about typography. And what typography is it's the manipulation of type and letters. So as we look at the image on the screen, we can see that it is created by the image of a parrot, but if you look a little bit closer and you break it down, you can see that this image is created completely by letters that were used. The areas that are darker have more letters overlapped and condensed to create a darker spacing, whereas where they are spread apart creates a more open effect. A lot of designers use type for different things to get different points across. This image of a cobra, is made up with words that would then describe something like this. This also deals, it looks like, with some shapes that it had first in the background, and then white text on black background as opposed to black text on a white background. This artist then took it text and then made several different types of birds, a little more simple than some of the other images that were shown, but they do get more complicated. This artist then took the word lion and created the head of a lion out of it, which is a little bit more common. Also threw in words like roar that would describe what the lion is. Okay, an elephant made out of 5s and 0s. Zebra made out of the word zebra. Okay, and this allows, this manipulation of text and how you can do different letters in different forms and different shapes. So I'm going to briefly show you how to do that, and then before we get to our assignment, this is a pretty simplified portrait of a person. You can kind of see the pencil lines that they scanned in so that they were able to line up their text properly and how they wanted. One that's a little bit more complicated. This artist chose to create a portrait out of phone numbers, dates, descriptions of who the person is, things in their life. If you look closely, you'll see a lot of different things within this. Chicago, engaged, spending time outdoors or reading, twin, daughter, April 19th, 1982, two sisters, phone number, another phone number. So the frequency of the words and the letters and what's in there gives a lot to look at. And it's a lot of manipulation of small little pieces of text that are layered on top of each other in order to create a much more complicated image. Again, like we saw with the cobra and parrot, where the text is denser and heavier, that's going to create your shadows, and where it's more wide open and bigger, that's going to create some of your highlights. Something a little bit more abstract and simplified, you can see the face of a person looking up. This would be their nose and mouth, glasses over their eyes, their hair. Okay. This one's a little bit clearer and easier to see. And then kind of a basic design of an alphabetic letter made out of letters of various fonts and sizes and weights and things like that. So when we go to use text, there's a couple different tools that we want to use. So on the left hand side, I've got my board set to Essentials Classic. You'll see this letter T, and the T is your type tool. When you click on it, hopefully in your window it shows up this character thing, and it may be up top, it may be on the side, it may be over here more, but what that's going to do is it's going to give you a specific font. Whatever, there is a default font that Adobe has that it works with. I've changed mine to Times New Roman because it's a basic font. It'll give you a style of font, so the regular Times New Roman, italicized, bold, or bold italicized. Then it'll give you a font size. Okay, and it presets up to 72. You can type in any number in here though, and then it'll allow you to stretch the size of that font. So the first thing we'll do is we'll create a text box. So if I choose my type tool, and I come over to my artboard that I'm working on, and I click down and drag it, it's going to create a box. And what Illustrator does is Illustrator populates some words inside that box so you know what can fit there, how big stuff is. And it's really kind of nonsense. It doesn't really mean anything. It's just different letters and different words. So when I highlight it, that's going to allow me to change it. If I click on character, what that's going to do is it's going to give me this panel of different things that I can use to manipulate my text. So the first one would be my different fonts. And in Adobe, they have a number of preset fonts that are locked in place. Okay, so at the very top of the list are going to be fonts that I have used recently within Illustrator, most recently Times New Roman. And then it's going to be alphabetized, and it's going to give you a sample. But you'll also notice as I roll over my samples, the text in my box changes. So you really get a preview of what your text is going to look like as you scroll through these different forms of text. Okay, and then the text, the fonts are broken down. So if you come up here to filters and you click on filters, it classifies your different fonts. So sans serif, sans serif means without serif, and what a serif is it's the ends that are added onto regular letters. So anything sans serif will not have any flares at the end of any letters, any vertical or horizontal strokes. So they'll all be straight block style. Okay, Times New Roman is a serif font. So if I wanted to find that, I could then filter all my fonts so that they all have serifs, or they all have that little flare at the end of the letters in some way. Then there's slab serifs, which are more block style. Okay, script fonts. Old English, which is really one style font. Monospaced, so they're all tall and a little bit closer together. Some handwriting fonts, so fonts that are going to look a little bit more handwritten. And then there's decorative fonts. And decorative fonts you're going to use for special things. You're going to find your symbols in there, which you'll probably rarely use as far as creating different documents. And then you can separate them by property. So if I want a lightweight font, it's going to give me any lightweight fonts that I have downloaded here. Any heavyweight fonts, it's going to do those. So if I come up here to clear all, it's going to give me all my fonts, and if I click on heavyweight, it's going to give me all my heavyweights, and then it's going to give me all my lightweights. Because I had decorative fonts selected, it was giving me only lightweight decorative fonts. So you can filter by this first, and then you can come down here and filter by these based on what you're looking for. Okay, so if I click on this, but I don't really want those, I can click off again. Right. Contrast. This is going to be height of my font. Okay, and this is going to be the width of my letters. So if I want letters that are really wide and spread out, or if I want really narrow, close together letters. This is going to give me fonts that type in all caps. So every letter is capitalized. This is going to give me only fonts that are uppercase and lowercase. This is going to give me specific number styles of fonts. This is going to give me other old style type fonts. So you can filter them to find what you're looking for to fit your design a little bit easier that way. For this, we're just going to stick with Times New Roman. It's kind of a basic font that we can easily work with. Right? Then that drop down menu underneath, this again is my font size. So again, I can increase that, but I can also come up here and I can type in something that's well beyond the font sizes that it gives. So I type in 100 and it's going to increase my font up to 100. Okay, and drop it back down to something a little bit more reasonable for this. This is going to control the spacing between my lines. So if I'm trying to get a lot of text in a small space, I'm going to decrease that. Okay, and I usually don't want to go past 10 or 12 because then your letters kind of start to overlap a little bit. It becomes very difficult to read. This would be good if you're using type for like those designs that I showed you earlier. If you need to create a more dense space with your font, with your type, so that it's a little bit darker, it's going to do that for you. Get back in here, highlight this. Again, in order to change this stuff, your text does need to be highlighted. We'll bring this back out. Okay, notice I didn't highlight all of it. We'll go back to this, and we'll bring it back out. This here is going to change the spacing between your letters, so I can bring all my letters a lot closer together, or I can spread them out farther. Okay, and a lot of people use this really to kind of fill boxes within their designs. This is going to change the kerning, which is the spaces in between. If you have a large area selected and you need to shrink it down, use this tool instead. The kerning, you need to have just kind of one small specific space chosen in order to adjust that, and that's just going to be the space between those two letters. Okay. Next, let me increase the size of my text box here so I can highlight all of it. Next in here is this, and this is going to control the height of my letters. So if I need my letters to be much taller, you know, I can increase their height, so it's going to stretch them vertically. And then the one next to it, the arrow underneath it, this is going to stretch them horizontally. So if I have a narrow font that I need to widen, I can widen it using this. Or if I have a wide font that I need to narrow, I can narrow my letters. Now you'll notice as it narrows them, it becomes a little bit harder to read as well. This is going to change the placement of my letters, the height. Okay, so it'll move them up or move them down within a certain space. And then this will rotate the letters left or right so that they're at an angle. And you can rotate them all the way, you know, to 90 degrees and beyond. You know, basically flip them upside down. But there are some easier ways in order to do that. Down here, this will allow me to create. So if I have a space here and I really want all these to be capitalized in this font, I can click on this and it'll capitalize everything that's highlighted. If I click on the one next to it, what it's going to do is it's going to leave my capital letters in here at full size, and then all my other letters that are lowercase will be capitalized, but they'll be shorter than the ones that I capitalized to begin with. So you'll notice this capital letter is taller than all the other capital letters. Okay, and the same with down here, and that'll remain capital while the others go down there. Okay, this is subscript and superscript. Okay, and that'll take one specific letter and move it up. So for example, in here, if I highlight this, I click 8 and I type in H2O. Okay, for water. Oops. This 2 is usually not full size as other letters. It's either subscript or superscript. So I'm going to come in here and I want to move it up, so I superscript it, or if I want to move it down, I can subscript it. For whatever reason, that was chosen already, so let's try that again. Here we go. No, it's not allowing me to do it for whatever reason. Okay, but it would move that to where superscript moves it up, subscript normally would move it down and below. So if I take this, let's get rid of this text box. Try it. We'll create another one. Right. Let's see if we can do it now. Yeah, for whatever reason, it's not cooperating right now. But so it allows you to take that 2 and move it down here, as opposed to superscript, which makes the letter smaller and moves it up. Okay. Then the last 2 here, this is underline, anything that's highlighted, and this would be strike through, anything that's highlighted. So that's how you can manipulate those fonts, or manipulate your text as it appears in a text box. If I want to type just a single letter for manipulating, if I choose my type tool and I just click, it's going to give me those words again. Okay, and I can take those words and I can move them around, and it's just going to be those. And to resize these, I can resize these just using these corner boxes. So if I want to do it so that it stays proportionate size-wise, height and width to what it is now. I grab the corner, I hold down my shift key, and I drag it, and it's going to increase my letters. If I want to manipulate them otherwise, if I want to bring them closer together, I can do this. If I want to make them taller, I can do this. You know, and I can adjust them. I can flip them upside down, or I can mirror them. Okay, and I can really kind of play with that to get the text to do what I want it to do. With this, it does allow you to manipulate your text. Okay, you do need to have it highlighted. It is going to assign a font, and you can adjust your font that way. But sometimes when you're working on a design, you need your letters to fit in a certain space. So sometimes it's easier just to resize it this way. So to do that, again, choose my type tool, and all I do is click on my artboard, and I can start typing. So we'll just get rid of those. If you hold down your type tool, you'll see an area type tool. When you select the area type tool, you're going to need a space or a shape that is already there. So I want to unfill this one and just kind of give it an outline. And then I'm going to take my area type tool and I'm going to apply it to this, and it's just going to fill that space with text. So it's going to fill my form with text. And then I can adjust that text like I did before. I can, you know, spread them out a little bit, change it up however I need to do that. The default, again, for some of these is, you know, once you change it, it'll kind of change your default and how it's set. But how you want it to do that kind of depends on what you're working on. If you are working on a specific design where you want to, you know, change the shape of your form. So for example, if I take this box, okay, and I take the fill out of it, and I come up here to my pen tool and hold that down, I can go to my anchor point tool. I can then come to the any point in this box, and I can add another anchor point, and I can drag my line, and it'll start to create some curved edges. Okay, you'll see these handles like we had when we used our pen tool. It's going to allow me to manipulate basic shapes, you know, in different ways. Okay, and any anchor point I add kind of shifts my overall shape. And I can take the anchor points that already exist, you know, I can move them out a little bit and kind of mess with them. You know, but then I can grab these anchor arms. You know, I can really start to create some odd shapes. So as I begin to do that, I pull my shapes into, you know, I can create custom shapes this way if I'm designing specific things. And then I can take my text tool, my area text tool, area type tool, I click on that, and it's going to fill it within that shape that exists. Okay, so if I have a specific form that I'm designing for a client that they want text in, or if I'm creating a logo that I want my text to be in a certain shape, I can create that shape and then fill it with the text that would go in that space. Okay. Also, it's type on a path. So in order to type on a path, the first thing we need to do is have a path. So if I take my pen tool and I create some curved lines to work with, okay, I don't want fill on that line. Okay, I just want a line. If I go into my type tool and I go type on a path, and I hold that over the selected path, it's going to put text along that path. So I can create specific designs. I can use text to do specific lines. Like in that portrait, if you were doing hairlines, you know, you could create that hairline with a line and then apply the text to it. And again, I can go in through my characters. I can change the spacing between my letters to bring them closer together. you know, and how spread out they are along that line, okay, depending on my design and how I want that to work. The other type tool that's in here is the vertical type tool. So again, I just click on it and it would put my type into a vertical form. It would just type straight up and down. And then there's specific applications for other ones that are within the type tool. So a vertical type area type tool. So it's going to fill that area with vertical type along the path, so my letters would be done differently. Okay. So for now, we're going to focus on a little bit more on our type tool and how we can manipulate specific letters to change them. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to highlight this, and just so that I've got a little bit more to my letter, I want to make it bold, and I'm just going to increase the size to make it a little bit easier to see what I'm doing. So it's highlighted, and I want to take it, and with it, with just the blue line instead of outline, I'm going to go into object, I'm going to go into type, and I'm going to go to create outlines. And what this is going to do is it's going to take each letter and it's going to turn it into a shape. So it's going to have anchor points that you can manipulate. When you do this, though, you can no longer type within that letters or within that text box. So when I do create outlines, it's going to outline every single letter, but when I go in here, I cannot create a cursor, so I'm not going to be able to delete anything that's in here or retype anything. So before you would go in manipulating letters, you want to make sure things are spelled correctly, because if I forgot the A or the I in Martin, or if I put an extra letter in there by accident, I can't take it out right now, okay, as far as my spacing. But what creating outlines allows me to do is I can come into a specific letter, okay, and if I choose my anchor point tool, I need to choose a specific letter, then choose my anchor point. You'll notice all these anchor points show up within this letter. I can then take those and I can move, you know, some of my lines. I can really transform this letter. I can even take out anchor points if I wanted to. And when I take out an anchor point, what that does is it straightens that line. So if I were to take this anchor point out, it would connect this anchor point to this one. So it would just go straight across the top like that. I don't necessarily want to do that. Okay. If I take my anchor point, add anchor point, I can add one in. Okay, so I could add another anchor point in here. And then I can go in and I can manipulate that with my anchor point tool, okay, to really adjust kind of how the shapes of my letters go if I really wanted to. Okay, so if I really wanted to mess with some of my letters and change them and how they look and how they're shaped, you know, I can really go in and manipulate my text so that it looks totally different, but it starts with that basic form. A lot of people will use something like this to just make small adjustments to letters. For example, you can come in here and with my direct selection tool, which is the one next to my selection tool, I can choose this anchor point or these paths. Oops. You know, and I can just adjust that how I want it to, but it's going to keep the things I've already got in there. If I double click on it, move it out here, I can adjust that. I can take this and I can make my edges curved. So it really allows you to do a little bit more as far as manipulating the form, whereas over here with the anchor point tool, you really change the shapes of those lines, what this does is now I'm taking specific anchor points and I'm making minor adjustments, or I'm moving them, so that I can make rounded letters or change things. I can move this up here so that I can adjust letters on a minor sense, as opposed to doing some major alterations like we did with that one, with that M. Okay, so this allows you to customize lettering a little bit and maybe even design your own. So if I added an anchor point in here, right, and then I came back and I took out some of these anchor points, it really kind of changes the shape of that letter. I take that serif off, and I can really manipulate my text that way. So let's get out of isolation mode. Let's bring this back. Okay. So what I want to do now is I want to show you how you can put text into a specific form. Okay. So I want to create a diamond shape. So to do that, I'm just going to create it by its, using my line segment tool. So I'm going to show my grid. So, and this allows me to line some things up. I'm going to choose my line segment tool, which we've used before. I'm going to create a diamond shape. Need to make sure my lines have outline to them. Let me choose this one. Okay, and I want this shape, so I'm going to just combine these, group them all together, so that it's all one shape now. Okay, and I did that by making sure my line segments met at anchor points so that they connect. So this is all one shape now. So I can fill this if I wanted to, and it would, I can manipulate it that way. Okay. So what we want to do is we want to fill this shape with text. So I want to create my text here. And what I need to do is my text needs to be outlines in order to fill the shape, because the program needs to be able to manipulate the text. So I'm going to go into my type, I'm going to create outlines, I'm going to let it do that. Then I'm going to take this shape, and this shape needs to be in front of my lettering. So I'm going to go to my object, arrange, bring to front, so that it is in front of my letters. And then I need to make sure both things are selected. Okay. Now we're going to go to object, envelope, distort. Oops. I'm going to go make with top object. Oh. So it only did it with that line. That is not what I intended to happen. All right, let's try this again. Okay. Or I can fill it, that's fine. Okay, I want this ML to be in this diamond shape. So again, I'm going to take it. You'll notice it's on top of. I need it behind, but first I'm going to create outlines. All right. Then I am going to move this, bring to front. Make sure I have both highlighted. Envelope, distort. And it's going to distort my letters. Okay, so that they fill that shape. You'll notice the shape itself disappears, but my letters kind of move within there. What I want to do though is I really kind of want the edges of the M because it stretches them to fill this point. If I really want this more straight on the edges, I really kind of want it centered. What I can do then, let me get back to before I did that. I'm going to take this and I'm just going to move it off to the side for now. I want to cut this shape down a little bit. So I'm just going to move it so that I have some anchor points that I can work with so that I'm cutting it evenly. I'm going to take my line segment tool and I am going to cut it here. Okay, so that is do it on the other side as well. And then I'm going to highlight all of this. I open my pathways, Pathfinder. If I click on divide, what it's going to do is it's going to divide along those lines right there. Okay, and this is going to allow me to select this and pull it off to the side, select this, pull it off to the side. Now I can come out of isolation mode, bring this back, highlight both of these, object, fill up, distort, make with top. Oh. I forgot to ungroup these. Object, ungroup. There we go. What that's going to do is it's going to separate these from this. So again, highlight them all. Envelope, distort. And it's going to put my ML just into that diamond shape, but it's going to keep it from warping like we saw before. Okay, and then if I need to, I can always recreate that box to go around it. So I can create that whole form right there within. Maybe line these two things up. Open my alignment box and then I'll align them vertically and horizontally. Okay, so this allows me to manipulate my text. You know, if I really wanted to, I could then stretch this out and it'll stretch out my letters to fill that. So if I wanted a more stretched out diamond shape, you know, I could create it that way. All right. So with these tools, what we want to do is you are going to, let me hide my grid again. Hide grid, since I'm done using that. Kind of, sometimes it's easy to work with, sometimes it's a little more difficult to work with. But again, that is how you can manipulate some text within Illustrator. You know, that allows you to kind of flip and rotate and move things how you need to create some typographical images that allow you to use text to do some different things. So what you're going to do is there's a PDF in Schoology. You're going to create a typographical insect. Ideally, you will use the letters that are used in the name of the insect. You should create it on an 8.5 by 11 format, and then you will build it so it fills the page. If you decide to do multiple insects on a single page, just make sure you fit that to the page itself. I would recommend you make a full one and then group all your letters and then resize it if you're going to do multiples. That way you're resizing the whole thing proportionately as opposed to having to resize each thing individually. You can change the color of your font as you see in the butterfly and the fly. or you can just go straight black over white. But again, using those tools to create density or to create open space. This beetle is kind of a good example of how they use different characters. Please use only the characters found on your keyboard. You shouldn't be using symbols for this assignment. You should only be using letters and numbers and punctuation marks that you can find on the keyboard themselves. So look at the PDF. Your document is going to be 8.5 by 11 as you create this. Don't forget, if you get stuck, ask any questions that you need to ask, and I can help you with that as you need.